All right. Bob, are you going to do introductions tonight? I'm not sure who we had on tap to start us out.
No, I think we're turning it right over to JD.
All right. Well, here's information about JD as we get started tonight. He's going to be our MC for the evening and lead us through some exciting time here with some of the people that you got to see in the videos we had for homework. So, JD, take it away.
Well, thank you. First thing I need to say is I have not gone through the General Board of Global Ministries Earthkeeper program. I don't know how that got up there, but it's a good program and you all should sign up for it next. And Jenny's will be able to tell you about that. Tonight, I hope you've had a chance to watch the videos that folks from our general agencies have shared with you. And if you're not, they're still good to watch after this evening. A lot of you have seen my name because I'm the moderator I'm the registrar of this event. So I'm glad that so many of you are here tonight. I want us to begin with some of the words of Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman was an African American theologian and is known. Jesse Jackson says he carries Howard Thurman's Jesus and the disinherited with him wherever he goes. And but Howard Thurman also, I believe that like Bishop Tutu, who worked to end apartheid in South Africa, and then after, in his retirement, worked to end climate destruction throughout the world. And I believe that Howard Thurman, were he with us now, would also be joining us in this. He literally, he was both a nature mystic and a civil rights theologian. And so one of the things that I think, is a blessing for us in this movement is most of us came into it because of the quiet times we spend in nature. So, and for me, the only two times in my life I can say that God spoke to me directly were in nature. So I'm reading from his book, Meditations of the Heart. In quiet, one discovers the will of God. In the quiet time, I may seek to discover the will of God for my own life. This quest must be pursued with great diligence and consecutiveness. It is well to use a part of each period in seeking to find the answer, or more importantly, clues to the answer to this deeply felt need. A person wants to know that their life's purposes and plans are floored by a structure that is more than they are, that is comprehensive, significant, and good. When there is assurance that such a structure has been found, then the sense of being adrift, of living a meaningless life, disappears. The simple assumption is that God is in each one of us, a part of our very structure, and we are in God. We need not concern ourselves overmuch with this many speculative questions that may range through our minds as a result of such assumption. For the assumption is in itself something more. It is an insistent fact, a category which the rock upon which we stand. It is its own evidence. Very important indeed is it to be aware of the direction which begins to shape, within us as we seek to know the will with all of our hearts. Often the will of God becomes apparent in the central concern of our spirits, which leads us to act or function in accordance with its urgency. Or it may become clear to us only after we've exhausted our plans and our schemes for doing certain things or achieving certain results in our lives. Sometimes a person goes along sure of their direction, and then, under the scrutiny of a deadly serious searching in the experience of prayer, finds that all that they had been doing was mistaken. Often, only one step at a time becomes clear. For some others, in a flash of insight, the total meaning of their lives is made clear. God is a part of the very content of one's own life. Sometimes God's will is seen in simple earnestness and intense desire. Sometimes the quieting of one's spirit in prayer exposes the areas of sensitiveness to God's Spirit, which is submerged by much traffic. Sometimes there is marshaling of one's ideas, plans, and purposes in accordance with the sense of direction which looms larger and larger as it must for one's life. Always there is checking and rechecking, testing and retesting of one's life in light of what seems more and more the right course, the right way for one's life. At the length of one's entire life, no particular aspect of it, but one's entire life becomes pervaded with a quality which is the divine quality, an accent which is the divine accent. Gracious God, we give you thanks for all of creation. We give you thanks for Howard Thurman, who talked to trees and talked to you in front of a live oak tree in his grandmother's backyard. And you called him to your service while he was talking with you in trees. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, this evening we have a special time with the different folks from general agencies taking time in addition to their day to join us.
It would be useful perhaps to do a quick introduction to the people that are online, and then if you have questions from the week listening to the videos and what have you, and now's the time to offer them. I would ask you to enter them on chat, and that way JD or I or one of us can get them to the right people. So, and that way we don't have everybody trying to kind of come in orally and getting on over each other, because with Zoom only one person can talk at a time. So JD, I'll turn it back to you to introduce the people, and if you folks have some questions, please enter them in chat.
I will start with Liz Lee, who is now works for a new organization. The United Methodist Women is the organization that she used to work for. Now she works for United Women in Faith, which is what United Methodist Women is now called. It's not the first name change for United Methodist Women, but it's the most recent one. So, Liz, why don't you come forward? Liz had previously worked for the General Board of Global Ministries, heading what is now called Global Mission Fellows, and now she's in charge of the climate and environmental justice work of United Women in Faith. Elizabeth, can you
JD, could I suggest that you introduce everybody so people can kind of couch the questions and also know who's here to, what questions could be answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. That's important. We also have David Tier from the Board of Discipleship. Jenny Smith from the Board of Global Ministries, who is the staff person that's really in charge of all of what they're doing on creation care, and she runs the Earth Keepers program. And we have Jake Barnett from Westpath. For those of you who don't know, Westpath is what the United Methodist Pension Program is called, and they've been very active in helping our investments better follow principles of climate justice and other things. I'm not sure that I haven't seen Laura James from the General Board of Church and Society on tonight. Is Laura on?
I don't see Laura.
No, she's not on yet.
Okay, and so I think it's David Deere, Jenny, and Liz, and Jake Barnett that are here with us. Why don't we?
JD, I also see Ken Sloan from the Board of Discipleship here.
Hi.
Okay. I'm glad to have you, Ken. I didn't have you on, but if you and David want to answer questions that we get, that would be great.
I haven't seen a question in the chat yet, so I'm going to just ask Liz, if you, with the change in the structure, or at least the name of whatever the women are now calling, has there been any change in your emphasis in terms of creation justice?
Great, thanks for that question, and good evening, everyone. It's so good to be with you all, and thank you for your faithful witness in caring for God's creation. And the answer is no. So our name used to be United Methodist Women. It's now United Women in Faith. And our two campaigns that we have and two social justice priorities, one is climate justice and the other is ending mass incarceration of communities of color. Those are still priorities and they will continue. And in our climate justice work, it'll continue throughout the quadrennium and most likely ongoing because the crisis probably will still be going on, and then even in the next quadrennium. And our Just Energy for All campaign will continue as well. And part of the switch has been recognizing that we have those who are leaving the denomination and how and those who still want to be present together in our sisterhood of grace. And so being able to provide a space for all women of faith to engage. And we also have members who are not United Methodists who are part of United Methodist Women. And so the name change really reflects a broader community.
Thanks, Liz. Plus, we don't do quadrennial anymore anyhow. I think we're going into the octrennia or whatever.
That's true. COVID has changed many of things.
Okay. We have a question. When I looked at Discipleship Ministries webpage, I did not see specific resources for Earth Day, but maybe it was updated. And I know that was addressed in, I think, Ken, it was in your talk. Do you want to address that, or do you want to have David?
Happy to speak to that because I'm the curator of that page. And if you go to discipleship site, which is umcdiscipleship.org / creation, I think it's called resources for creation care. Or if you do a search for discipleship ministries on Google and creation, I think our page will come up. The page, when you open it, is labeled for Earth Day 2022. resources, but what we actually did is we're building onto the resources that we did last year. And so in the URL, I think it still says 2021, but we are in the process now of continuing to add resources. Our main focus in a couple of areas is in educational resources, which David is going to talk about a lay servant program that we're very excited about to partner with some other groups. Also to kind of curate worship resources that have been prepared over the years around creation care, and oftentimes are kind of tied to the cycle of the lectionary, but in the terms of themes like this are really available for people to peruse and use at whatever time they're going to do a special focus on creation care as well. My area at Discipleship Ministries is stewardship and generosity, and I've talked about environmental stewardship. I've been doing this position. I'll be going on I'm in my 11th year. I've been talking about environmental stewardship often with congregations when I've tried to get them to expand their view of stewardship from just those couple of weeks in the fall to a year-round emphasis, and to broaden their understanding of stewardship to include things like stewardship of the earth, but also about how we, not just the money we give to the church, but how do we live with the money that we keep and that we use and we spend, that we make a lot of decisions about what is important to us by the way we spend that money. So those kind of themes have been involved in this for a while. And for last year's creation care celebrations, Earth Day, I did an article around physical things that churches could do to make their church greener. And I'm going to be excited, hopefully, to add to that this year to bring some new ideas in. David, would you like to talk a little bit about the lay servant course? Oh, sorry.
Let me do a quick. No, that's okay. David posted the link on the chat, so if you want to go, if anybody wants to see the link directly and they didn't have time to write it down, it is
excellent.
Yeah, the link is the link when evidently the IT people changed it to the Earth Day 22 resources, but the name of the URL says 2021 in that. That's a little misleading.
Right. Thank you, David. And like I said, we'll be updating it, and it really actually, I think it shows up if you just do a search for creation care, it'll come up in that. There's something else I wanted to mention that we were talking about, but David, do you want to talk about the course?
Yeah, I feel this is preaching to the choir, since you have Bob Downs and JD and Jonathan and all these other luminaries here, Pat, and so many people who could speak to this more. But Bob, what would you have me say about the course, other than typically lay servant ministries courses might be born in the minds of the education committee, right? That group of 15 to 17 people will meet. They'll look at the pedagogical goals of lay servant ministries, and then they'll pursue things that fit the goals as articulated in the catalog in the Book of Discipline. But what's better actually is this little mystery page 42 in the 2022 catalog. But every year it's in the back of the catalog and it says Alternative Advanced Courses. And this is your get out of jail free card in lay servant ministries. You can do any course you want that meets the goal of lay servant ministries as an advanced course. So I actually believe that these sort of workshopped courses that begin organically on the ground in annual conferences where folks are seriously considering these issues and then get worked out into a leader guide that becomes an actual course, it's a much better process than a bunch of folks sitting around a table, with a lot of good ideas, right? So Bob could say more about the Lay Servant Ministries course than I can. This that you're participating in, how many people here are here because you are a part of the course right now? Right? A number of you, yeah. So you're living it right now. But this is later in the year, around September, the rest of the connection involved with Lay Servant Ministries will have an opportunity to use this course. Now, it won't hit our catalog until January of 2023, but it is our hope to have a version available to you that with the PDF Leader Guide written by Bob and Chris Sinkowitz and Bob Downs, based on the Pat Watkins book, the revised edition of the Pat Watkins book, Climate Justice. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that other than the real leader. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that the leaders around climate justice issues in our denomination have been United Methodist Women and Global Ministries, right? And so it's not that discipleship ministries, the General Board of Discipleship, or others, the publishing house, haven't cared about this. In fact, I worked on Fletcher Harper's book, Green Faith. Does anybody remember that book? I was the senior academic book editor at Abingdon Press. It's really a nice book, and Fletcher's wonderful. But we haven't always talked about discipleship in terms of creation care. As not an add-on, or maybe, yeah, that's the justice work, right? We'll let the justice people do that. But an integral part of discipleship is how we live in the places we dwell, right? And so I would say that this course is going to be doing that for so many people. It's going to be introducing a lot of folks to the things you already know, and that is that discipleship requires responding to what Calvin Schrag called the beckoning sensibles of our world. Whether those are animate or inanimate, whether alive or not, the world around us is alive and on fire with the presence of God, as JD said so powerfully earlier. So I'm just excited about this. And I studied with Sally McFaig back in the 90s when I was in the doctoral program at Vanderbilt. And the fire in her to love creation for God reasons was just, she used to talk about St. Augustine being God intoxicated. And I thought she was, because it was her passion for God and her love for the natural world that drove all of her work. So anyway, I've said too much, but so the big question about this course, the better people to answer would be Bob and Chris about what they're doing in the Leader Guide. But many of you already have the first edition of the Pat Watkins book. And we're just thrilled to be doing this as an interagency effort. And then also my hope is that as the denomination moves away from sexual ethics as its primary conversation point, right? Important issues, vital issues to be sure, but that we can begin to come back to some of these broader contexts of discipleship. So was that my like 10-minute, 2-minute elevator speech, JD? Sorry.
David, once you get David started, that's the danger there. Those of us on the team with him know that. I just would like to say, if I could just close by saying this, that I would really, since I was asked to be the curator of our resource page, it would be really helpful for me if those of you who are able to would go to the page, look at, basically, we've only added a few things to this point that are new from last year. If you would look across, we have worship resources, we have children's messages, all the kind of things that our audience comes looking for. If you would give me suggestions about other things that we might include, and we tried to make references to different things that were happening in different agencies, like Global Ministries, Earth Keepers, and other opportunities for people to take some action. And I do want to highlight one thing that is kind of unique to discipleship. Scott Hughes, who is David and my team leader in the group that we work at Discipleship, pioneered a course called Courageous Conversations, helping people learn how to have hard conversations with others on very difficult topics. And Scott has kind of adapted it for how do we have conversations on race. Has specific courses in that. He's used it to how to have courageous conversations around the issues of general conference. We had, in addition to that, I think we've had one on Christian nationalism, but he's also done one around creation care. And the model of courageous conversations is one that tries to get people to feel a little bolder about having difficult conversations in congregations where people are not of the same mind, where they're blue and red, or whatever the divisions might be around a lot of issues. And so we're really happy that Scott has brought this gift of this courageous conversations model, and we have tried to find as many opportunities as we can to help people who take the course and learn the model to use it to have different conversations. So if you can give me any feedback, I'll stick my email address in the chat, and just email me directly and say, well, I thought this really doesn't deserve to be there, and I don't see anything about this, or you liked something that we put up there. That would be really helpful. Because like I say, it's really just my second go round at trying to be a curator of resources for this. So I appreciate any help I can get. So thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah.
And just to follow up on David very briefly, we will touch on those folks that want to get credit for the advanced course for this workshop at the end. So we will comment on that. I have two questions, and Jenny, I'll tell you, you are in the bullpen. Not the bullpen, the out at bat circle, but this one, the first two questions are kind of similar, so I'll direct them to Mr. Barnett. One says, describe the ways that our investment are being directed toward creation care efforts, and then as a counter, is Westpath having conversations regarding divestment from fossil fuels? So I suspect those two kind of go together, and I will let. Where are you, Brian?
Yeah, no, I'm.
There you are, Jay.
I'm right
Sorry.
here, Bob. Yeah,
I'm looking at.
not a problem. I'm visiting my brother, so it's a little dark where I am. But no, thank you all for having me. I happy to answer those two questions. In terms of just a brief recap of some of what I shared in the video, Westpath's belief when it comes to creation care is that in order to achieve the returns profile that we see as necessary to support our beneficiaries, participants, and institutional investors, we need to
Jake, could you speak a little closer to your mic?
Sure, yeah, happy to. That in order to see this transition, we need to have a sustainable global economy, which Westpath defines as one that promotes social cohesion, long-term prosperity for all, and environmental health. And so when it comes to the actions we're taking to support the transition to environmental health, we are positioning many of our investments in support of climate care and creation. So, for example, we've worked with one of our asset managers to position nearly 2 trillion of our 2 billion, I apologize, of our approximately 28 billion in pension assets towards companies that are intentionally better positioned to perform well in a low carbon transition. There's an additional approximately 800 million that is with investment managers choosing companies that are specifically creating climate solutions in areas like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, energy efficiency. So that's some of what we're doing on the investment side. Let me take the exclusion side next, because that's in relation to the divestment question. Right now, we're not considering widespread divestment of any sector. It's our belief within Westpath that when it comes to the most powerful mechanism that investors have to affect change in the financial system, engagement and stewardship is the more powerful tool rather than divestment. So part of how we're really leaning into that engagement and stewardship question, I lead up many of our efforts of the Sustainable Investment Stewardship team in that regard. We are the co-lead on 4 different companies within the Climate Action 100 Plus. That's an investor coalition representing approximately 600 investors and over 65 trillion in assets. So really a very sizable portion of the investor universe engaging with companies to push them to align with a net zero future, so to align with a more sustainable future. In addition to that, within those engagements, we engage on questions like, are you aligning your lobbying with long-term best practices? Are you ensuring that this is a just transition which will honor communities and workers along the way? So it's not just about the targets and emissions. There's certainly questions of their broader societal impact within those discussions. We also engage our asset managers on these questions, and we engage policymakers on these questions. So for example, Westpath submitted a letter in support of robust methane regulation to the Environmental Protection Agency just this January to say that this is something that we see as necessary and important for long-term transition. And then finally, we're trying to do, to galvanize other investors to join us. Faith-based investors have a really rich and exciting history of leading many of these efforts. So I serve on the board of the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility, which has a long history. It's celebrating its 50th year anniversary of pioneering a lot of environmental and social efforts in creation care. And then I'm also the co-lead of the UN-convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance track, where we're working with other investors representing approximately $10 trillion in assets to support the transition to net zero. So lots going on. Happy to talk through any of that more, and thank you all for the time.
Okay, thank you.
Nate, several of us, many of us that have investments in WestPath would like to see a fund that really is fossil free, that we could move our assets into. Are you considering such a fund?
Yeah, in terms of access to the fund, that I'm happy to follow up and talk through it, but we do have a social values choice fund, which is an option available. That's what I'm invested in through my own investments. So that does have exclusions of many fossil fuel companies.
Last time I looked at that, though, it had Southern Company, which is one of the biggest utility polluters it's the largest utility polluter because it burns a lot of coal.
Well, what I'll say about utility companies, JD, is if you're going to be excluding those, you're actually undercutting a fundamental sector for the overall transition. Because what you need to see in terms of the transition is a massive electrification of the economy. Because if we're going to be transitioning away from fossil fuel investment, internal combustion engine cars to electric cars, there needs to be that electrification of the economy. There needs to be broad build out of the utility sector. Now, with that said, we are engaging with companies not specifically with Southern Company, but it's actually the Illinois State Treasurer, who's a good friend of mine, who's engaging with Southern. But with, for example, WEC Energy Group, to ensure that they are working hard to wean themselves off of coal and transition to more renewable energy and build out the grid so that it can support the electrification of the economy.
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
I would encourage you. I would encourage you to make a really fossil-free fund for some of us, because I have been pretty patient leaving my money with WestPath. But in the last 17 years, I've worked for a different organization than the church, and I've been able to move my funds and into things that don't invest in fossil companies at all.
I completely understand. I mean, something my former CEO, Barbara Boisjegrain, said once that I fully agree with is that if we were to green our portfolio in such a way where we were aligned with 1.5 degrees Celsius and net zero, but the real economy went to 3 degrees, then we all lose. And so our focus is going to continue to be on engaging and trying to have action in the real economy that transitions to net zero, rather than focus on decarbonizing our portfolio in a way that doesn't align with that real world change.
But give us an option for those of us that put our own money in, not the church's money, but those of us that put our own money into WestPath. It would be good to have another option.
Happy to bring that back to the team to discuss.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jenny, we had a question. Can anyone, or maybe the question should be, who can become an Earth Keeper?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking. Any United Methodist who has a passion for creation justice, an idea for how they want to put that passion into action, can become an Earth Keeper. This is a training program where we equip folks with ideas to develop projects. We teach anti-racism, community organizing, project planning, share more about the resources you've already been learning about in this course. and set you on a course to really have some scaffolding to put your dreams into action. And so I would encourage all of you to consider this program as the next step following up on your training here. We actually have a training, virtual training coming up this summer. We have one starting next week, but it's too late to apply for that one. But I would love to see some of you in our summer training, and I'll add a link in the chat. And I'll also take this moment while I have the mic to let you know that the Global Ministries Creation Care Network is another great resource page that I'll share in the chat. It's a place where United Methodists crowdsource information about creation care. They share events, resources, stories. You can see other Earth Keepers projects there. So it's a place where you can sign up. You can also find other people in your area who are engaged in creation care ministry. So I'll share that link and encourage you to sign up to join that network. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. We had two questions that relate to the North Carolina Green Church Initiative and a couple of comments that were made along the lines. I don't think that's actually sponsored by an agency of the church. I think it's sponsored by a conference, and Pat probably knows more about it than anybody. Pat, do you want to? The question was, if I'm not in North Carolina, can I become part of the Green Church Initiative? And I don't know the answer.
The answer is yes, absolutely. The North Carolina Green Church Initiative, we sort of borrowed, I hate to use the word stole, but we sort of borrowed it from the Virginia conference. And so with their blessings. And so if we can pass it around from one annual conference to another, that's just fine. And the team in the North Carolina conference took what the Virginia conference had put together and modified it a bit to suit North Carolina a bit better, particularly some of the agricultural issues that are prevalent in eastern North Carolina. But the short answer is yes, you can use the North Carolina Green Church Initiative, but I would encourage you to make it your own. Add things, delete things, however you need to use it. But absolutely. And I can get you copies of that if you would like. I can send you copies electronically if anybody would like that.
Great.
Bob, I did put a mention in the chat on that question too, that as our United Methodist Creation Justice movement is becoming more organized, we have a whole group bringing together annual conference leadership from across the denomination. And one of the things they'll be looking at is how to spread this Green Church Initiative to other annual conferences too. So be in touch with your conference leadership on creation care and let them know you're interested. And that may encourage them to get it going for you.
Okay, I have one, at least the last question that I don't think we've touched on yet is really a free-for-all for all of the agencies. So I will read it. And if anybody wants to venture an opinion, that's great. It says each agency is doing some important work that the local churches need to be aware of. Is there some written material that shows the interconnection among the agencies? If so, how can we access it? Now, I will start by answering chapter 8 in the book that we've been using is sort of an attempt to start to identify these things. It's dated. As Dave pointed out, the book is going to be updated. We're hoping that chapter is one that we may be able to update on a more regular basis than the publication updates of the overall book. But that maybe doesn't exactly answer the questions. I know the agencies have been working together in the initiate, in reducing carbon emission. And so Jenny, I saw you raise your hand, so we'll turn to you first. Please tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, this is a tricky question. It's a question that folks have been asking for a long time. Where can we go, that one place where we can find everything that all the agencies are doing? And I will share that I just shared a link for Resource UMC, where United Methodist Communications, is starting to build out a page that will do that. And part of what has pushed them and helped them, they were already starting to do this, but are getting more engaged, is that 12 of the agencies and commissions are now working together. And I don't know, did you guys talk about the net zero commitment? Did you have something on that?
Well,
in the program?
Yeah, way back in the beginning, I know Pat mentioned it as part of talking about the bishop's new initiative
Okay.
also, but that was probably about it. I mean,
Okay, well, I'll just share real briefly, if it's all right, because this is a really great way that the work of the different agencies are coming together around a commitment that we have all made for a just and equitable transition to a net zero economy and to net zero emissions within the agencies and commissions by 2050. We actually are just putting the last I's and T's on a report that will be coming out in April to share where the agencies and commissions are, what we've been up to since we made that commitment last year. Essentially, what we've been doing is learning how to use tools for measuring emissions and starting to get our heads around what we should be measuring, which is a bigger task than it might sound like on first sight. But the other thing that's happening is that we're talking a lot with each other about opportunities for collaboration and around how we can use the different resources that we each bring to the table to be able to work together to reduce emissions in ways that we haven't before. We have a team working on justice and equity specifically to ensure that the strategies that we're thinking about for reducing emissions are ones that will help communities and the earth to flourish and not do harm. And there's just some really interesting intersections starting to happen, and I think some really unique things are going to be emerging in the next couple of years.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd also just mention, and I think it's kind of intriguing, and I don't know that I definitely can say that the motivation for this was creation care, but I think it's going to be a significant impact. And I may have mentioned this in a little video that I did, but the agencies in Nashville have mostly changed their operating system either to decide, like in discipleship, we are permanently work at home, to some of the agencies that have moved to a hybrid model. And what we have now is at Discipleship Ministries, we had two buildings when we were working there actively. One of the buildings has been sold to Vanderbilt because we work from home. And we now have three agencies working out of one building. The publishing house has minimized their footprint and sold their building up in the north of Nashville. GCFA, I think, has their building on sale, and it's using space in the Denman building, which houses the Upper Room Chapel. So we have higher education in there as well. And so the publishing house is using space at United Methodist Communications. They at one point had talked about moving, closing their building, but they have a studio that's utilized quite a bit, and it's kind of a one of a kind in the Nashville area. We just didn't find another place we could put a TV studio in. So our board is meeting this week, and they've talked about that in terms of our changes in the way we do our work. Has that an impact, is helping us kind of keep that movement towards minimizing our environmental footprint, I think. And I don't know if everybody's aware of that's happening among the agencies, but I think it's kind of exciting, not just because I don't have to sit in my car for an hour commuting every day. I think it's a responsible way for us to move as agencies.
Yeah, Ken, if I can just piggyback on that, I know the other agencies are doing the same thing, but we were all polled as employees of the agency as to how far we are from the office, how much we drive in, and distance, and so we're all being made conscious in our. I mean, the pandemic did it, right? It's not like we all became suddenly more ecologically conscious, but one of the upsides, if there is an upside to a global pandemic, is just the possibility of a radical reshaping of how we live our daily life. I don't buy gasoline much anymore, and many of you don't either, and that's a glorious thing, right? So
I support what others have said in terms of the Net Zero campaign being a really important location of how we do it well, in terms of our equity and justice and social teachings and our commitments. UMW, or UWF now, is also engaged in that. Most of us are remote, in fact, and we have decreased the space in our footprint in the building. I really appreciate Jenny was speaking about the webpage that she linked to that has the various resources, because I think that is one location And the hope was so that it would be updated regularly. I did want to recognize with our United Women in Faith name change, a number of the resource links are not working. I just went there and I found out. So if you are looking for resources like the 13 Steps to Sustainability, our Climate Justice Simulation, our actions, please email me directly and I'll drop it in the chat box, climatejustice@uwfaith.org, and we can get that to you in the transition. And since I do have the mic, I will note, as I said in the video, we do a lot of legislative and corporate action at times. And currently, one of our priority is to press the federal government, Congress, to pass ambitious climate legislation, right, and funding specifically, so that we can, as Jake was speaking about, electrify, our utility system, modernize the grid, electrify transportation, so that we don't have to rely on $5 at the pump, right? So I'll just drop in the chat box that legislative action, and you could use that. That's going to be live. We update it regularly with updated language. Obviously, Build Back Better is not the language that's being used right now, and we're advocating for $550 billion in climate investments. So that can be something you use, because once you go in there, you put in your phone number and your address. They'll give you, it'll actually call you, so it'll connect you directly to your member of Congress, both the Senate side and the House. Then you can leave a message or talk to someone live, and it's available. So if you're thinking about an action, right, with your church or Sunday school, on a Sunday, you can come together, it could be 10 of you, and all of you can call your senator to really press for ambitious climate legislation. So I'll drop that in the chat box.
Okay, thanks, Liz. I think those are the ends of the questions that I've seen, and we are definitely have pushed the time period that we had folks here, but I really appreciate it. I think we got questions answered that were useful and helpful to everybody, so I really think it was a better use of the time. But we are getting to the point where we do need to get into breakout sessions, so unless there's any other really weighing issue, I want to thank Jenny, Liz, Jake, Ben, and David, and I think I got everybody that's here with us. And move back to JD to go into breakout rooms. And you other folks are welcome to stay with us, but I know I also promised you that you could get back to dinner or whatever else it is you need to do this evening. So if that's the end of the questions, JD, we turn it back to you.
I just can I just say one word of encouragement to you all? I'm just going to speak on behalf of all of the guests here tonight, that it is so great to see this huge group of people spending their evening working on creation care, trying to think through how they're going to bring this work into their churches and communities. You all, thank you. Thank you so much for this ministry, and thanks to all who have organized this training for you. It's really exciting to see what you're doing here. So blessings, and let us know how we can be resources for you.
Thanks, Jen.
Jenny. And they've spent 5 evenings on this program. So there's a lot of commitment. We're expecting to see a lot of excitement from churches that they're going to take this home to. I don't want to take more time, but I want to thank all of our guests from the journal agencies. And I want to note that Laura James from the General Board of Church and Society was not able to be here tonight, but Laura is another resource that you could use. Thank you all. And I think Jonathan will send this to our groups, and then we'll come back for a closing.
One of the things that we had planned to do at this point was to have the team leads or the breakout room leads give a really short summary of what happened in their group. Now, do we want to do that? And if so, we probably should do that now and just you not give everything that you said, but just like a 1-minute synopsis. If that works, I'm going to call on Chris, who's sitting next to me on my screen, and let her start.
Well, I'm delighted. First of all, we talked about flowers, and I love flowers, and people do love flowers. And Donnie's idea for her church is that they are going to grow flowers and do it in such a way that involves multiple groups and grow those flowers and perhaps collects the seeds and be able to share those with folks, but also to cut the flowers and take them to people who are homebound or sick in some way and share them, so that's also an opportunity for them to spread God's beautiful creation, but also to potentially talk about creation care, especially as they work with the children. So that was one idea. And then Delilah is working with an idea with the United Women of Faith. I'm going to stumble over that a bit, I'm sorry to say, but a Bible study that would focus on creation care, but start with care of self. And, I think that's really important. One of the things in the scripture says, love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And how many of us often let that little tag in drop off? So the idea of starting with creation care is also self-care, and then moving on out programmatically from that standpoint, and possibly involving then not only the United Methodist Women in various ways of expressing that as they go through the programs and continue to learn, but also potentially involving United Methodist Men as well. And Anita and Bob are working on a curriculum also. Their focus is reaching out to churches with a basic curriculum that would give an idea of the broad view, taking people through understanding the scriptural basis for it, the science that's undergirds it without it being heavy-duty science, the what can we do about it, those kinds of things, moving through that and trying to get that developed in such a way that they can have that available to other churches where, people can pick that up and say, oh, I can use this, and use it in Sunday school or other groups, study groups, and so forth, and have that be a way of reaching people who are not necessarily immersed in creation justice, but this would be a way of introducing them to that. Any of the three of you want to jump in and say more? Okay, so we'll keep you posted as we know how these things develop. Next.
Okay, I was going to, Carla, are you?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was thinking that you might call on me. So we had a pretty lively discussion too. Vivian and Patricia both are in the Baltimore, Washington area, and so I think it's Vivian that is a member of a smaller church, and so she thought that her minister was interested in the children or youth becoming involved in a community garden project, which is similar to what we do at our church here in Greensboro. And then Patricia, at her church, they have a lot of different ideas, or she does, circulating. And we talked about the polity in the local church. With regard to the SMARTY goals, my suggestion wasn't as much related to the specifics of the SMARTY acronym or the SMART acronym as much as it was the point behind it, which I feel as though, and I know that we all sort of feel as though, that we don't want to attend the webinar. Loving People and Planet has done very well this year. We don't want people to come up with good ideas and then go home and never follow through with them. So I was saying too, you need to measure your success and set up a timetable. But the point is that you want to use the information that you've been given and take the things that you've learned seriously and try to make things happen at your local church. And so we talked about that. I think Patricia had a question about Westpath and what why that was relevant to what we were doing, and I tried to explain that to her. And so I was just trying to provide a little bit of information based on my experiences, and so that's what most of our conversation was about. I had a lot of information to share and suggestions that I thought would be helpful based on my experience, because I'm only 3 years into working with the Creation Care Ministry and the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement and so forth. And so that's a lot of what we talked about. And then we did offer a prayer at the end that they might follow through with the things that they are doing or intend to do, and that God might continue to guide us in our work.
Great. Thank you. Pat?
So we led off with a few minutes of conversation about Westpath. Lou was in our breakout group, and she had worked with trying to engage Westpath over the years to divest. And so we talked a little bit about the fossil-free UMC movement leading up to the last general conference. And so we talked a bit about how can we re-engage that. A couple of people, in addition to me in the breakout group, feel like that's a pretty important thing. And so how can we continue? I suggested maybe the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement can have some conversation about how can we resurrect the fossil-free UMC movement and put some more pressure on Westpath to think about divestment. So we talked about that for a bit before we got into what we were supposed to be talking about. A couple of people were doing gardens. Margaret came with a long list of things that her church is already doing, and they're going to add a pollinator garden to it. And Gregory came with the church that's not doing very much, and he also talked about a garden. So we had a church that's doing a whole lot and a church that's not doing very much, both talking about gardens. And in Gregory's instance, part of his vision, I think, is to try to put some kind of team together at his local church. Let's see. We also, Sarah is from New Mexico, and she's going to do Earth Keepers, and so she's going to become an Earth Keeper. She signed up for training, and she has a really long list of things that she would like to do, or certainly lots of options that she could do for Earth Keepers training. But I think the coolest thing we talked about with her was the potential of putting together a creation care team for the New Mexico annual conference, because they currently don't have one. And so we talked a little bit about that, kind of the efforts of the Creation Justice Movement in terms of trying to engage annual conferences in doing this work. And then Lou, who's from South Carolina, is getting ready to move to Washington. And so she's going to do what she can once she gets out there and figures out what she's doing. So that's us, unless any of you guys. There was Joe Posey from Charlottesville, Virginia. Many of you remember the protests in Charlottesville, the Black Lives Matter, with the anti-Black Lives Matter protests and the problems in Charlottesville regarding Confederate monuments. And Joe's church is right across the street from a city park in Charlottesville that contained one of those monuments. The monument is now gone, and the city park is just fallen into disrepair. So there's conversation at his church, and I really love this because I said it sort of fell in their lap. There's
Cool.
racial justice across the street. There's environmental justice if they can do something with the park, and there's Christian faith all coming together, and it has fallen in their lap. And so I love that, because when things fall in our lap, maybe that's God telling us, you got to do something about this. So we had great conversations. So thanks.
Okay. Sherry Koob, are you still leading a group?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you. We didn't get into the Smarty goals or any of that other stuff. We just had a good conversation around what everybody is planning to do. And there were 6 of us in the group, and 4 were basically saying that we don't really have a green team in our congregation, and we're trying to get it started. And one is a pastor. Carmen is a pastor, and she's going to do a series, sermon series, starting the weekend of Earth Day, and then there will be a Bible study that goes along with that. And she will encourage people to give testimony every month or quarter about what kinds of simple changes they are making and what that will do, how that's affected them. And so, and then she also hopes to start up a Uniting Women in Faith unit in her small church. Others said that they would be working with trustees and others to look at what they could be doing around the church and encouraging people to be green. Others were just interested in pulling teams together. And so we talked about that. And then Sue had this wonderful idea that she described as being off the wall, but hey, it's very creative. She's looking into recycling crayons. And she's researching an organization that will take the crayons and melt them into shapes that aren't typical for crayons. And then they also take the paper that the crayons were in and make fire starters out of those.
Oh, cool.
So, and this is an organization that's south of Tucson or near Tucson, and she's actually going to Tucson to visit somebody, so she's going to actually go check them out and see what she can do to get this program launched. And then I'm looking at a gardening project. We have a preschool in our congregation that has raised beds, and they plant every year. They plant stuff. Mm-hmm. But you know what? Their program is closed from about May 20th until the beginning of September, and nobody tends it. So I'm looking to see what we can do to get other groups in the congregation to take over tending and harvesting, and maybe planting some stuff late in the season so that the preschool kids, when they come back in the fall, have something that they can harvest.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Sherry. Nan Derling, are you still leading a group?
Yes, I am. Thank
Okay.
you. Laura and Terry and Rodney and I met. We all had different ideas, but we gelled together very well as a group. And I think one of our big ideas is that we're going to stay together and continue to interact and see what other ideas we can exchange. Laura is hopes to do something very creative in conjunction with their grocery program to give out light bulbs. And there are ways that she's looking at grants and other funding sources that people can get LED light bulbs, which if you remember back, I don't know, it was last week or the week before, there was a chart showing how much money could be saved. So that would be a really good idea. Terry is working to introduce people to the whole idea. And she seems like she's very good at making connections and talking to people. And so she's going to try somehow to get people more interested in some things at the church. And then her family has a farm in West Virginia. So she's going to take some personal responsibility for talking with the family about some things they could do to improve their farming, which should be very interesting. Rodney is looking at particularly recycling and would like to get the youth of the church involved and plans to talk with the youth leader and get the kids going. Apparently, whenever they have some kind of get together at the church, I don't mean just the youth group, but the church, they've got a lot of waste, and to see what they could do to recycle and be better stewards in that regard. I'm looking at a bunch of different things, but I'd say I would like to focus on worship. And this just came today, but this was in your resource list, the Season of Creation, a preaching commentary. And I think that should be something that would be very useful. I'm in a very rural area with a lot of people who are quite close to the land and the water. I'm on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And so they don't really need to hear a lot about how to protect the land. We're dealing with subsidence and we're dealing with rising tides here. We got our own issues. But talking about some other things that we might be able to do. So that's where we are.
Great. Thank you. JD, I believe you have a group.
I do.
Good.
And we have 5 of us, 2 from the Baltimore Washington Conference, 2 from Virginia, and 1 from Western North Carolina. And we didn't follow the SMART format, but we did talk about what we're doing. And one of the things we decided to do was to share our emails with each other, so that over the next few months, as we try to implement programs in our church, we can share what we're doing and get ideas from each other by email. And we had a little conversation about Westpath, and it turns out I didn't do a very good job of introducing Jake from Westpath, because didn't explain that Westpath is what used to be the Board of Pensions.
Wow.
And that if you don't know that Westpath is pensions and health benefits, then it's a little hard to enter into the conversation that we had. But we mostly talked with each other, except for those members of our group that were having internet problems still. And hopefully we can share better by email than we were able to share online. We're all anxious to get more young people working on this in our churches and with us here. But we had a good group, and I hope they enjoyed it as much as I did getting to know them.
Great. Thank you, JD. All right, I will give a quick synopsis of my group, but before I do that, have I missed any other leader? Jonathan, did you have a group?
I did. I was covering a group tonight, and I know we've got a couple more things to finish up. So just very quickly, I'll say one church is looking at putting in water fountains that include the bottle refill station for to encourage people to use reusable water bottles in all of life, but also at church. Another is looking at the land that they have, wanting to do some growing, some gardening and things there, and partnering with another church that has able-bodied people who would like to participate and be a part of it. And so create two congregations working together on a project. There's another church has a milkweed garden that's come along, and they're wanting to expand that into more pollinators. And then the church that I'm at is I'm looking at how to encourage our folks to get more connected to the land. We have a lot of grass, so I'm digging up parts of it, building a garden and some pollinator gardening areas. But also one of the things that we've noticed is fewer people are putting altar flowers in on Sunday mornings. And so I'm looking at taking a section and growing flowers that can be cut and made into arrangements for worship and bring it right into the sanctuary. So a great way to connect our land with worship. Back to you, Bob.
Okay. I don't think we have any other groups that haven't reported. I will be real quick on ours. I think if I picked one word, our focus was on recycling, but not just recycling, cans and papers. Tom was part of our group, and he described the program that I actually mentioned last week when we were talking about the interchurch recycling program, where many churches get together and they process on one day, a couple times a year, and some of the exciting things that were done, and questions about where some of that recycling went. We also had Debbie and Edna both talking about possibly doing some recycling in their church. They also, I think Debbie was talking about a garden that might end up starting in her home rather than at church because of issues of people to help. So we talked about ways of trying to generate involvement from different people in the community. And I know Todd had a number of issues that he had raised with his church, but one of the questions he brought up, which was interesting, and if anybody knows the answer to this, please get with Todd. They're looking at runoff from a parking lot. We talked about a rain garden and what have you, but we also talked a little bit about pavers that are porous. The question is, does anybody know anything? Not to answer now, maybe get in touch with Todd, but what are the costs and what are the relative value of doing those kind of things? And none of us had an answer to that, but it was a question that was asked. With that, we are going to move into a closing kind of worship and dedication. But before we do that, I want to answer a couple of questions that have come up about just the administration of the course. We're now at the end of this course. David talked about the fact that this workshop does count for advanced lay training, and one of the advanced courses. You can get credit for that. If you want to do that, there's a couple of different options. If you happen to be in West Ohio, or I believe Baltimore, Washington, your conference has already approved this course. If you're in Baltimore, Washington, contact Sherry Coop or Mike. If you're in West Ohio, contact me, and we already have worked that. If you are interested in getting certification, now, by the way, this is for the lay members. If you are interested in getting certification in any other conference, contact me. David has agreed that Board of Discipleship will draft a letter to your conference saying that they recommend this be counted, and then your conference committee makes a decision. So in all cases, basically, BWI, contact Sherry, and I'm going to ask Sherry if you'll put your email address in, or you could put your husband's. You don't have to put your email address on the chat, and I will put mine in the chat. Everybody else, if you want certification, if you don't want certification, that's fine. But if you do, please contact me and let me know your conference and your contact, and then we'll go from there. We are also talking about the fact that a number of folks have already expressed an interest in hearing what's going on or getting connected. you can connect with the boards and with the creation justice movement directly, and we've given you contact information in several of the resources that we've shared.
It was just 2.5 weeks ago that we began this journey called Loving People and Planet in the Name of God. We've had the opportunity to learn together from people steeped in the issues and theology, and also from one another. We began that first Sunday focused on our theological grounding. That's where we should always begin. As United Methodists, we have the Wesleyan Quadrilateral. One way we experience God is through the awareness of the majesty and amazing workings of the natural world that God has given us to steward. God has also given us reason, which is informed by both science and examples of indigenous people living in harmony with nature. Our tradition gives us our social principles and the Book of Resolutions to help us see more clearly how we can love people and planet. Tradition, reason, and experience find their bedrock in Scripture, the other element of the quadrilateral. In session 1, our scriptures reminded us from the beginning that God is creator, who pronounced it all good. Then the Creator gave us humans a charge to care for creation. In the New Testament scripture, Jesus answered the question as to what is most important in life. He said to love God and neighbors. It follows that loving the Creator also means loving all of what the Creator God has created: planet, people, and all other creatures. And Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan, which is what he talked about next, reminds us that loving our neighbors means caring for those who are most vulnerable. In session 2, the prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel painted a graphic picture of how the earth suffers when people neglect or ignore the charge to care for God's creator gifts or fail to ensure justice for God's people. In the New Testament, Jesus pointed out that what we do to care for the least is what we do for our Redeemer. The earth is already judging humanity. We have much to confess for our degradation of the planet and our disrespect for those who suffer. In session 3, our scriptures provided us some hope. In the Old Testament, the image of the cut down tree sending up a new shoot refocuses us on God's amazing creation. Through the natural world, God is continuing to heal. God is God. Like Job, we will have and will continue to face hard times, but God is with us and still creating. In the New Testament, Jesus promises to be with 2 or 3 gathered in his name. That verse is in the center of Jesus's teachings about when people sin and then being willing to forgive 77 times. In the midst of all that challenges and worries us to our core, we have the assurance that we are not alone. We are not beyond redemption. God is still creating. Jesus is still redeeming. In session 4, Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers and had to endure other acts of treachery, nevertheless continued to be open to God's leading, which moved him into a role where he could help Egypt prepare for the coming famine. Ultimately, he would look back and proclaim, God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph's preparation saved not only the Egyptians and others in the surrounding area, but also his own family. In the second scripture, Jesus told the story of a widow, one of the least of these, who was persistent, even in the face of injustice and rejection. Her faith and her persistence were rewarded. And Jesus says ours will be too. Preparation and persistence. We come now to session 5. The story of Esther has long been a favorite of mine. I've taken heart from it whenever I've felt like I had to stand up for something important. The verse, who knows, perhaps for you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this, has given me a sense of God's claim upon my life and courage to follow through. I identify with Esther. But when I heard Reverend Malcolm, I gained another perspective. And what he talked about there was such an amazing thing. He talked about the disconnect in the story. In her palace, Esther was comfortable, but she was cut off from her community. Her uncle Mordecai was part of the community, which was in grave danger. But Mordecai was cut off from the source of power to make a change. The connection between Mordecai and Esther was essential. Both had to have courage. Each had a role, and working together, they could save the people. So now, sometimes I see myself as Esther, and sometimes I see myself as Mordecai. Always, I recognize that what is essential is being connected and connecting others so that those who are in danger are able to access power, and those who have power are able to use it for help those who are in danger. Like Mordecai, when we see danger, we need to speak up. And like Esther, when we have access to power to make a change, we need to step up. We need to be in relationship with one another to get the job done. I take this story as important guidance for all of us as we work for creation justice. Today's other scripture keeps me going when I get overwhelmed or discouraged with the magnitude of the issues confronting us. There's so much to do. How can the little I do make a difference? The new followers of Christ in the Corinthian church were squabbling about who deserved credit for the church's growth. Paul reminded them, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. I find this verse really comforting. Saving the planet is not all up to me. My job is to plant seeds. Someone else can water them, and I can water seeds that other people have planted. I need to do my part. We need others to be working too, but ultimately we can trust God, God who provides sunlight and rain and microbes in the soil and more. We can trust God to give the growth. My job is to be faithful in planting seeds, to support others and water where I can, but I can trust God. I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the scriptures that we've talked about over these 5 sessions and allow one of them to come to the forefront for you. write a comment in the chat to name a guiding one for you at this point in your journey. And we'll take a minute or so for you to do that.
As we come to the close of our sessions of our workshop together, we just want to thank you for being here and being a part of this learning experience. Our goal throughout the entire time of planning and putting this together for you was that it not just be a time of learning information, but that it be something that be transformative to move you forward. What you see on the screen now are some items that Chris shared with me that when COVID took place and we moved home to worship from our homes, these were parts of her worship station. The water there in the shell, speaking of baptism, the light being the Holy Spirit, that moved her and her husband and family even in the midst of the challenges that were in front of us. And so as we finish up tonight with you, there's many challenges that we've talked about. There are many ways in which we have considered how God has called us to be stewards, to be caretakers, to watch out for the least of these among us, to understand how maybe God prepared us for such a time as this. As we look out on God's beautiful creation, maybe sometimes we see it like this image, that creation is so big that even if we stretch our arms as wide as they can go, we feel like we can barely touch much of it. And yet, maybe through these workshops, through loving people and planet in the name of God, has brought you to a point where you feel the hand of God touching you on the shoulder and the light of the Spirit burning within you and calling you to make a difference in your community, in your church, in your life. And so we challenge you, we commission you tonight to not just be those who have completed a workshop, who have learned a few interesting things about Scripture, who have put some ideas into prayer, but that perhaps for you, now is the time to go forward. Do something. Find some way in which you can begin to make a difference, not just for you, but for your whole congregation, for your whole community. Look around you, listen for where the Spirit is speaking, and take a step into the future, into God's calling upon you and your ministry and your church. And let us be commissioned as those who go to love the people and the planet in the name of God. We go with you. And we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you again in July as we regather to share with each other and learn from one another and see what's going on. But may you plant some seeds, harvest some possibilities, grow a garden, clean up a stream, deal with styrofoam and items in your church, transform minds and hearts, but go forth with the hand of God on your shoulder as you spread wide your arms to embrace God's creation. Go in peace, and thanks for being a part of this experience.
May we pray. Creator God, we have nothing but thanks and praise for you. You have called all of us here to be in ministry of caring for, healing, and redeeming your creation. We thank you that there is such a ministry in the United Methodist Church, that you have given us ears to hear the groanings of creation and eyes to see the destruction of your creation. We pray so hard, Creator God, that you would give each of us a vision of how we can be most effective in our work, how we can lovingly change the hearts of those who see your creation as a source of profit, how we can communicate your vision of creation, how we can transform the church that will then transform the world into a place that will support our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and enable all future generations to enjoy and appreciate the magnificence of your creation. Thank you for calling us. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for showing us the way. Go with us now and always in wisdom and in love. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good night, everyone.
And
Bye.
good
Good night.
night.
Night.